All right, good evening. Sorry about that. Just getting things set up over here. My name is Catherine Kaplan, and I work with SEB Housing. This is the information session for the 2 affordable townhomes being made available at 21 Crowninshield Road in Brookline, Massachusetts. And the purpose of this session tonight is to give you a little bit more background information on the homes. We're also going to cover the application, eligibility, and lottery processes, and what to expect after the lottery. So if you have any questions during this session, you're encouraged to either type them into the chat or go ahead and unmute yourself. If you have a question, when you came into the Zoom session here, you will have been muted, but you can go ahead and unmute to ask your question. This is a live session. You got a notice when you entered the room that it is being recorded. It will be saved to SEB Housing's YouTube channel after tonight. And if you have any questions for us after the lottery or after the info session tonight that you didn't think of and you want to connect with us, you can connect with us by email at info@sebhousing.com, or you can call us at the number that's on your screen now there with any questions. So if anyone has any issues right now hearing me or can't see the screen or anything like that, let me know before I proceed. All right, so just for some background information on who we are, SEB Housing, we are an off-site affordable housing consulting group. So we've been hired by the developer to market the affordable homes, conduct the information session, and collect and review applications as they come in to determine applicants' eligibility for the affordable housing program, and then also to run the lottery. So we're not part of the sales team. We haven't seen the homes in person. But in the initial phases, we will be your primary contact rather than the developer or the sales team. But further along in the process, you're going to have a lot more contact with the owner if you are invited to move forward to purchase one of these townhomes. So there's really 2 broad steps in the process, and we're going to discuss both of them tonight. The first is to apply for the affordable housing program, and that's when you'll be in touch with SEB Housing. We can answer any questions you have on the program. We'll do a preliminary review of your application, and if you're eligible, you'll be entered into the lottery, and we'll give you a position on the waiting list. The second step involves the process of reserving and buying a home. So your opportunity to do so will depend on your waitlist placement following the lottery. So if you're one of those top households after the lottery, you'll be invited to move forward. The information packet is what I'm going to be drawing from most tonight. If you go to our website, sebhousing.com, and go to affordable housing opportunities, you may have already done this, but you'd click on I want to buy and then select 21 Crowninshield, and you'll be taken to a page specific to this property with a downloadable version of the application, as well as the information packet that's going to have a lot of the information that we're talking about tonight. There's also going to be a template of a sample deed rider, which would be a document that's finalized closer to closing on the home. And in terms of the information packet, I'm not going to cover everything that's in there. So even if you attend the session tonight, I'm only going to be covering the main points. So it is recommended that you take a look at that document for even more information about this opportunity, because I won't be able to cover everything. So if you do choose to apply to purchase one of the affordable homes at 21 Crowninshield Road, you're going to need to complete that affordable unit application. And then you can submit it to us in one of several ways, whatever's easiest for you. You can email it to us, you can scan it to us, you can send it to our fax number, which is listed on the first page of the application. You can send it by regular mail, or if you're in the Needham area, we do have an office at 257 Hillside Ave. You can drop it off in our secure Dropbox all hours of the day, and we do check that each day. So whatever option works best for you, that's how you get the application over to us. We do encourage you to get your application in early. It's fairly brief and is only going to take you about 10 minutes to complete, because at this point we do not need supporting income documentation. but you do need to submit a mortgage pre-approval with your application, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes as well. The applications are due on September 13th, and they need to be received by SCB Housing by that date in order to be considered. You do not need to be a resident of Brookline in order to apply for this lottery. However, there is going to be local preference for one of the two townhomes, which we're going to discuss a little bit later on. But you definitely shouldn't be deterred from applying if you don't live in Brookline or in the area. All right, so just to talk a little bit more about the townhomes themselves. So these two townhomes are going to be sold at an affordable price to households with incomes at or below 80% of the area median income for the Boston area. So the townhome numbers, if you're looking online, and there are some market rate listings for some of the townhomes because these are new. The affordable homes are Unit 7 and Unit 11. And each of the townhomes has a large living room with white oak floors, a gas fireplace, a chef's kitchen with a 5-burner gas range, a large primary suite with lots of closet space, an ensuite bath with a glass shower and high-end fixtures. There's a generous guest bathroom on the top floor with an ensuite as well, because these townhomes do have 3 bedrooms and 3.5 bathrooms, so they're quite large, and in a great location that is close to the Green Line, the restaurants and shops on Com Ave, that's close to the parks and the Charles River. The units also have a private backyard with a patio. There is a 1-car garage as well as 1 surface parking space for all residents. And there is a condo fee of $192 per month for the affordable unit. And that fee includes trash and snow removal, as well as landscaping, your water and sewer costs. There are other items that are included in that fee. And if you were moving forward in the process, the owner would give you a list of all of those. So the sales price for the townhomes is $305,100. And this price is significantly below what the market rate townhomes have sold for in the community. If you've looked online at all for this opportunity, the market rate units were going around $2 million. So this is a great opportunity in, Brookline being a great community, obviously. So these homes, like I said, will be sold at an affordable price. They're only going to be made available to households with incomes at or below that 80% of the area median income, which is referred to as AMI. So AMIs are amounts that HUD, the Department of Housing and Urban Development, releases each spring, and Boston falls within that Metro Boston AMI area. Since these are affordable homes, they will have what is called a deed rider filed along with the deed at the time of purchase. And this ensures that the homes are going to remain affordable in the future, even if the owners eventually choose to sell them. So the deed rider, just a quick overview of that, it basically limits the amount from which you're going to eventually be able to resell the property. So this opportunity isn't for you if you're looking to buy, flip, resell the townhome within a year or two. This doesn't mean that you're not going to be able to sell the home for more than you paid for it eventually, but it must be resold to another affordable buyer. So you might have some return on investment, but you're not going to expect the same appreciation that homes selling for market rent might see. And there is a formula for the resale, the permitted resale price for affordable properties. There's an example on the last page of the info pack. It's also based on AMI. The deed rider also says that it must be your primary residence. So in general, you're not going to be permitted to, rent this out as an Airbnb or anything like that. And also the deed rider says that if you would like to refinance or make capital improvements, such as a new roof or something like that in the future, the Department of Housing and Community Development would need to approve. That's the state housing entity. So these are brand new homes. Those types of improvements would likely not be applicable for many years, but I just want to throw that out there so you're aware of the types of things that are listed in the deed rider. And so that I also mentioned that the mortgage pre-approval is a requirement with your application. And we suggest that you review the information packet, really just either make a copy or rip out page 8 of the info packet. It lists the required mortgage pre-approval standards for this housing opportunity. You can bring that page to your mortgage lender or the bank, show it to them. And the most important thing about choosing a lender for this affordable housing opportunity is making sure that you are getting a mortgage product that meets the necessary standards. So because of that, you might also want to bring a copy of the sample deed rider that is in the website listing that I mentioned. There is information in the deed rider that could be problematic for some lenders because certain loans won't accept all the terms that are listed in that deed rider. So for example, the loan must have a fixed interest rate throughout the term of the mortgage. It also cannot be an FHA or VA loan, since those types of loans do not accept the deed restrictions. You don't want to be in a situation where the lender grants pre-approval to you and then backs out at the time that you're trying to get to secure the mortgage because of these resale restrictions that are associated with affordable housing properties. So along those lines, we just want to mention that in our experience, it's been very difficult for applicants to successfully close with Bank of America as a lender. So we recommend that you don't use Bank of America for your pre-approval or mortgage because their mortgage products are likely just not suited for the affordable housing opportunities. But with that said, you're able to select any bank or lender you would like. Doesn't need to be someone right in the community. It can be whoever you would like. We just strongly recommend that you choose a lender that has experience with affordable housing programs. So there is a link in the information packet on page 8 that will direct you to the Mass Housing Partnership website. And their site is a great resource to help you find lenders who are familiar with affordable housing. Just one last point, the mortgage pre-approval standards state that you must provide a down payment of at least 3% of the purchase price. So half of that, 1.5%, must come out of your own funds. So your loan or mortgage amount can be up to 97% of the purchase price. So I'm going to pause there and see if there's any questions from anyone before we get on to the eligibility criteria and requirements for the affordable housing program. So let me know if you have anything.
Yes, hi. I actually have a question. You just mentioned, and maybe I misunderstood that, if you want to refinance after, it needs an approval, and from what entity?
Yep. So the deed rider is saying that if you wanted to refinance or make some, capital improvements to the outside of your condo and things like that, you would need to have approval from the state, which is Department of Housing and Community Development. It's just I don't know offhand all of what that would entail, but it is just something that they need to be made aware of, because they would potentially be involved in a resale of these units, because you need to show that you're selling them eventually to another affordable buyer.
Okay, thank you. And actually, one other question that it doesn't have to do with refinancing, but on the application, if you're writing independent, a full-time student, if a child is 14, is that considered a full-time student, or you're considering a full-time student only a college student? So just
it's really a full-time student is talking more about for program purposes, someone who's over 18, so who's an adult but still a full-time student. If it's just asking you to circle whether or not the child is full-time and their school age, that's fine. You can say yes.
Okay, thank you so much.
Sure. So I'm seeing here, what is the pet policy? I knew that is always a question in these, and I know that they are allowed. I don't believe I have the actual policy in terms of, if there's breed restrictions or whatever it might be, but I know that they are allowed. Yeah, I'll take a look in a few minutes just to see if I really don't think I have anything on that other than just that I know that they are permitted. So just throwing that out there. All right, if there's no other questions, I'm going to move on to eligibility requirements for the program. So on page 1 through 4, on page 4 of the information packet, there are the 4 main eligibility requirements for the affordable housing program. So the first is that everyone in the household must qualify as a first-time home buyer. And there are exceptions to this. But even if you do qualify for one of those exceptions, you would need to sell any home that you currently own to be able to close on an affordable home at 21 Crowninshield. So we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. The second eligibility requirement is that a household's income and assets must be below the maximum allowable income and asset amounts. They're listed on your screen now. And we're going to talk a lot more about those in a few minutes as well. The third eligibility criteria is that you must be pre-approved for a mortgage. And the fourth is that a household cannot have financial interest in the development or be what's called a related party. So these townhomes are being offered by the developer 21 Crown LLC. So if you work for them, you're related to them in some way, there's a possibility you wouldn't be eligible for this lottery. It's rare, but we always want to mention it. This isn't an eligibility criteria, but something I do want to mention for this particular lottery. So one person, these are 3-bedroom condos. 1-person households will not be entered into this particular lottery. And that's because larger households will have priority since these are 3-bedroom townhomes. And we do anticipate receiving quite a few applications from larger households. So we anticipate the units will be sold before we would even make our way down to the smaller households. 2-person households are only eligible for the lottery in this case if the household has a disability that requires a 3rd bedroom as a reasonable accommodation. So wanted to let you know that. You'll see it on the application. It asks what your household type is, and it's letting you know if you're not a larger household, you would not be eligible for this lottery. So in looking at your screen now, if you have it up, I have a note about that in the middle of the screen as well. So just to circle back on the first criteria that I mentioned, everyone in the household must be a first-time home buyer. So a first-time home buyer is when all household members have not in the last 3 years owned a home. So this includes through joint ownership. So if you have a household member who was on the deed of a home with a spouse or a partner, that person was still considered to have owned the home within the last 3 years if they were on that deed. There are 5 exceptions to the first-time homebuyer rules. They're listed in the information packet, but I do want to highlight the 3 exceptions that come up the most often. The first is if someone who has been referred to as a displaced homemaker. So that's someone who hasn't worked outside of the home for many years, but has worked at home to care for the home and family. They have owned a home with their spouse or partner, but no longer own the home due to a recent divorce or separation. So they're no longer on the home deed. The second exception is a single parent with at least joint custody of 1 or more children, or someone who is pregnant and they're now being displaced due to a family breakup and they're looking for a new home. Those people could have owned a home within the last 3 years and still qualify to be a first-time home buyer. The third exception is an age-qualified household. So this applies to households with a member who is 55 years or older, and that person has sold a home recently in order to purchase an affordable property. If you qualify, like I said, for those exceptions, you do still need to sell your home before buying a home at 21 Crowninshield. So this might mean that if you're in the process of a divorce or something like that, it would need to be finalized so that your name is no longer on the deed by the time you are purchasing one of these homes. Just want to pause real quick because I see that there are some questions. One of them is, do Brookline residents get 2 chances to win? Meaning, do they have, there's a local priority unit and the general unit? I guess you could look at it that way. I mean, Brookline residents will have, since there is local preference, we'll talk about this in just a few minutes. If you are a Brookline resident or someone who works full-time in Brookline or has a child who goes to Brookline Public Schools, those households are going to be first in line on the waiting list for one of the townhomes because there is local priority for one home. The second home, which is just going to be the general drawing, would be really just whoever is selected first in the lottery would be the first on that list. And so yeah, I mean, they'll be on both lists if that's what you mean. Everyone will be on both lists, but the Brookline residents will be higher on the local priority unit. And then another question is, should all household members have a social security number? That's a good question. I have never been asked that before, so I'm going to write it down. I do not know if that's a requirement in this program. I don't think it is, because I do not believe that my colleagues who process applications need to see your social security number, but in terms of getting a mortgage, I don't think so. But Maud, if you want to email info@sdbhousing.com, we can make sure that we have your email address and we get back to you on that. All right, so the income limits. Thanks for your questions. The income limits, just want to talk about those as well as the second eligibility criteria for the affordable housing program. So since these are affordable homes that are being made available to only households whose total household income is 80% or below the area median income, we want to make sure that we're verifying that income. And the maximum income limits are listed on your screen right now. They are the numbers that you want to look at and kind of figure if your household income is within those limits. They're listed on page 4 of the information packet as well. They're listed on the application, on our website. They're really everywhere. You're going to see that the 2-person household maximum is $89,500. The maximum for 3-person households is $100,700. 4-person household, $111,850. 5-person household, $120,800. 6-person household, $129,750. And then the little asterisk there is letting you know, I'm just calling this out in case anybody doesn't have it up on their screen. 2-person households are only eligible for this lottery if the household has a disability that requires a 3rd bedroom through a reasonable accommodation. So in terms of this income, this maximum income, you're not required to submit verification of income when you submit your unit application and mortgage pre-approval. Applicants will, when we receive your completed lottery application, you will be provided with a documentation requirements guide. And that guide details exactly what types of documentation we're going to need from you, depending on your income and asset sources. So for example, how many pay stubs we might need from you, the benefit statements, tax returns from the last 3 years, that sort of thing is going to be spelled out for you. So you should really review that guide carefully, because if after the lottery you are invited to move forward in the process, you're going to have about a week to 10 days to submit all of the required documentation to SEB. And so although we do not require the income verifications right now, I do want to give you a basic overview of how we count your income. So for this program, income is counted as a projection of your income over the next 12 months for all household members. So it's really all income for all members is included. So this includes, income that might be a little bit less predictable for you. So if you made bonuses and overtime, we do need to count that. The only exception is for minors. So anyone under the age of 18 who is earning a wage, we're not going to count their wage income. And for dependent full-time students who are working, we would only be counting the first $480 of their wage when we're determining your total household income for eligibility. We do have to count gross income, not the net income, so the amount that you make before taxes. And that's, although we understand, you're not taking home that full amount of your salary, but the program does indicate that we need to count the full gross income. So how we calculate your total income is not one size fits all. Everyone's income circumstances are unique. Some applicants have a weekly salary that is consistent throughout the year, getting a pay stub every week. Others are self-employed or working seasonally. So in those types of circumstances, there's a possibility we would need to look further into the past in order to project your anticipated income for the next 12 months. And then specifically for applicants who are self-employed, you will need to complete a profit and loss statement and provide supporting documentation. So your business expenses, if you are self-employed, will be taken into consideration. But for households who are not self-employed, it will always need to be the gross income that we count. In general, any income that you have been making, we're going to assume that you will continue to make it going forward unless we have some sort of definitive documentation stating that you're not going to be earning or receiving that income source in the next year. So for example, some sort of a written letter from your employer stating that bonuses and overtime will not be paid in the coming year, a letter from Social Security saying that your benefits have ended, that sort of thing. We're not permitted to accept statements from applicants. So if all of the documentation that we have from you is showing that you made $80,000 last year, but you as an applicant are coming forward now and saying you plan to work far less hours in the coming year, and you're only going to make $50,000 in the next year, we're still going to need to count that $80,000 as your projected income unless we have some sort of additional documentation that we need to consider, letter from your employer, that sort of thing. When you're thinking about your total income, this is all on the lottery application. So we suggest you take a look at that income table that's included on the application, but you want to think about, wages, whether they're from self-employment or wages from an employer, Social Security, SSDI, child support, alimony, retirement distributions, unemployment, workman's comp, a pension, all that sort of thing would need to be written down. Even periodic payments from friends or family members, assets that you have that generate income. You want to make sure you're including all of that on your application. So to apply for the lottery, there isn't a minimum household income requirement, but in order to qualify for a mortgage, you're going to need to meet the lender or bank's requirements in order to receive the mortgage pre-approval, which is required along with your application, that mortgage pre-approval. Assets. So we have it listed here. There is a asset limit. Households cannot have more than $75,000 in assets at the time of application. So this includes any funds that you would have to use for future down payments. So if you happen to have a family member or a friend who is being generous enough to gift you part of your down payment, that itself would be considered an asset. So you would need to disclose that. Assets would also include cash and savings or checking accounts, CDs, the net value of any stocks or retirement accounts, 401ks, bonds, even your Venmo or PayPal accounts. We're going to be asking for that sort of detail when we're looking at assets further down the line. So those statements, those monthly statements from those cash apps would be asked for. So you might think it's a little strange that we need to count money from that's tied up in your retirement savings account, especially since some of you might not be planning to access that money for many years. The program does require us to do so, since you could, in theory, access the account to withdraw funds, even though you would have a large penalty. So it is the post-penalty amount or the net cash value that we would be counting towards your asset limit. So at that point, you'd be asked to get a letter from your financial institution listing the post-penalty amount of any 401k account that you have. We do not need verification of any personal assets like jewelry, art, cars, whatever. It's really only these other types of assets. All right, I'm going to pause there and ask again if you have any questions on the eligibility criteria that we have gone through. I do have one direct message. I'm just going to read this real quick, but let me know if you have any questions before we move on to the lottery eligibility. All right, this is a very specific question that I have here as a direct message, so I'm going to leave it until the end if you don't mind sticking around, and I will answer that for you. Anybody else? All right, so lottery eligibility. So as I mentioned earlier, we want to make sure that we're encouraging you to get your application in as early as possible to get the process started. There are 3-bedroom homes. We do anticipate a lot of interest. So again, smaller households, 1-person households, most 2-person households would not be eligible for the lottery. And for your reference, all households that have 4, 5, or 6 members are considered that type 3 household that has priority for this lottery, as well as some 3-person households. If you're a 3-person household, for example, that is a head of household with 2 dependents, or 2 head of households with 1 dependent, but the 2 head of households, maybe their partners cannot share a bedroom due to medical reasons, and they have that 1 dependent, that potentially would qualify this family. So keep that in mind. There's a lot more details in the information packet on page 9 about household types. And so take a look at that. The application also details if you're not sure whether or not your household type would qualify, take a look there as well. So once we receive that lottery application from you, we're going to review it and contact you if any information is missing or appears incorrect. And then you'll have the chance to go ahead and correct it or resubmit it to us as necessary. So if you make a mistake, don't worry too much about it. We just want to make sure that we're in contact with you about that. So if you're found eligible for the lottery, you're going to be sent a lottery application number in the form of a dot and then a series of numbers. So that is the number that would be drawn in the lottery, and it's meant to be an anonymous identifier. So we're not calling out your full name during a lottery session. It's not a ranking of any sort at that time. It just corresponds with the order in which we received your application. So if you were the first person to submit a complete application for 21 Crowninshield, you're going to have the application number A.001. Again, the lottery application deadline is September 13th, so it's coming up pretty quickly, about 3 weeks. And the lottery itself is going to be held virtually in the same way that we're meeting now on a Zoom session on September 26th at 6 p.m. And shortly after that lottery, we'll create the waiting list. And the top households will then be invited by SEB Housing to move forward to move towards reserving the unit, also supplying your income information and all of that. And so during that lottery session in the Zoom meeting, numbers will likely be drawn from a lottery box, would hold them up to the screen, would be recording everything so we have record of it. And each lottery number would be selected during that lottery. So sometimes we think of lotteries, we think there's 1 winner, or in this case, 2 winners since there's 2 homes, but that's not really the case here. This lottery will be held in order for us to establish the priority on the waiting list, which will help us get to the next step in the process. So if you're watching on the night of the lottery, sometimes it's hard to tell what your placement actually means, since in this case, local preference households and non-local preference households will be mixed together. We would then have to sort the results and send you the waiting list. And then at that point, you'd have more clarity on where you fall on the waiting list. So if your number is drawn later in the lottery, so if you're drawn like 5th, 6th, 10th, you shouldn't lose hope. You may still have an opportunity to move forward in the process and purchase one of these townhomes. You know, sometimes the households ahead of you do not decide to purchase the unit. Maybe they're not eligible in the end, or they back out for one reason or another. So just keep that in mind. Following the lottery, we do our best to get the waiting list to applicants as soon as possible, usually either the night of the lottery or the next morning. And then when you receive that email, you're going to, this is after the lottery, you will find your lottery application number on the waiting list that's sent to you, and you will see where you fall. And at that point, like I said, you'll have a better idea as to whether or not you're going to be invited to move forward in the process. If you are one of those top households on the waiting list, SEB Housing is going to send you an invitation to move forward in the process, and that's when you'll be asked to provide all of that income tax and asset documentation to confirm your eligibility for the affordable housing program. So hopefully at that point, you've been able to gather a lot of the information that was spelled out for you in the documentation requirements guide that you received. And at that point, I mentioned you'll have about 7 to 10 days to submit that verification or that information to us. And so once we receive your application package, we're going to review it and respond to you within a few days. Most applicants do not submit a 100% complete verifications to us on the first try. And so again, keep that in mind. If you miss something, you receive a notice from us that says your application is incomplete, that's perfectly fine. There's 2 reasons for it. The first is just that there's a lot of information that's required, a lot of supporting documentation is needed. And then the second reason is just because sometimes when you do submit everything, we have follow-up questions for you. So for example, your bank deposit might have something in there that we need to ask you further about. Maybe it has some PayPal money coming in and out, and we'll need a PayPal, a statement from you, that sort of thing. So another reason that we just encourage applicants to be prepared and have their documentation ready early by reviewing that program documentation guide. All right, so I'm going to stop there again and ask if there's any questions. I see a couple have come in here. What's the difference between income and asset? So income would be, income that you have coming into the household through wages, benefits, pensions, that sort of thing, self-employment, and your assets would be bank statements, a bank account. So $75,000 being the max. You can't have more than that in, a combination of checking and savings or a combination of your net amounts of stocks, that sort of thing. And those are different from the income, the max income that you saw on your screen earlier. When are we getting the application number? So once you submit an application and it has been reviewed by SCB Housing and approved by SCB Housing, that's when you'd get the lottery application number. So it would be coming from one of my colleagues who's reviewing your application, and you get it in an email if you had an email address that was provided to us. If not, it would be sent to you by mail. And like I said, it would be in the form of A.001, for example, if you were the first person to be approved. Yep. All right, anyone else before I move on to a couple other things? All right, so if you're ultimately found eligible for this opportunity after the lottery, you've been called forward and you have submitted all your supporting documentation and all of that, you're one of the top households on the waiting list. Our next step then would be to submit your completed file to what's called the monitoring agent. Mass Housing has selected another consultant agent to be the monitoring agent, which is a requirement on this affordable housing program. And they're going to do a file review as well to give us the green light that you're eligible to move forward. So once that monitoring agent has approved your application that we have already approved, the process becomes similar to the steps that you would be taking if you were to purchase a market rate home. And then we always want to mention at this point too, if you've made it this far in the process, you might decide at this point that it's a good time to hire an attorney to assist you with navigating through the home buying process. We encourage you to do that. It's perfectly acceptable, and it's probably the smart thing to do. Buying a home being a huge decision, you want to make sure that you understand the process and you're well represented and prepared. So once the monitoring agent has approved your application, we're going to put you in touch with the owner at that point or the developer of the unit, and you can schedule a tour of the townhome. And at that point, you would be completing a reservation agreement, and you would be reserving the home with a $500 refundable deposit. So after you reserve the home, you'll have about 10 business days to sign the purchase and sale agreement and place the required deposit of that 1.5% of the sales price minus the $500 you already paid when you reserved the unit. So your purchase and sale agreement is going to include certain agreed upon contingencies, as well as potentially your closing date. And that really is one of the final steps in the process of buying a home. So the finish line is almost near at that point once you've signed your purchase and sale. And after you have signed that purchase and sale, you're going to need to go back to the bank or lender who issued your mortgage pre-approval, or you could decide to use another bank, not the same one that you used for pre-approval, and you would then obtain a mortgage commitment. So this process varies a little bit depending on the lender, but generally, in order to get a mortgage commitment, the lender is going to want to review all of your documents up until that point, which would be the deed rider that we mentioned, the purchase and sale agreement, and that sort of thing. They're going to do an appraisal on the home. SEB housing at that point is going to do a final review. So households do need to remain eligible for the affordable housing program up until the closing date. So about 3 to 4 weeks prior to your closing date, SEB is going to conduct a final review. And at that point, we're going to ask for updated pay stubs, bank statements, your mortgage commitment letter, and we're going to again forward your final package to the monitoring agent for their final review. If you maintain your eligibility for the affordable housing program throughout that process, you would move towards closing on the unit. And once you've closed on the home, you can go ahead and move in. There's not going to be any future income or asset eligibility reviews at that point. You don't need to, show that you're still making under a certain amount 2-3 years from now. None of that is required. Once you're in, you had qualified for the affordable housing program at the time of your closing, so you're all set. That really covers what I wanted to get to off of the information packet and just about these units themselves. Again, the lottery application for the affordable townhomes are at Crowninshield are on our website. The information packet is there along with that deed rider. And I have a couple of messages here. If you guys have questions, feel free to unmute or type in. The one here is, what is the timeline of purchase and sale and closing? And they're asking, would it be approximately November? I think it depends because, applicants are going to need to get all of the documentation in to SEB, their supporting documentation, their income documentation, all of that. So some people will have that ready within a week. Some, we need to go back and forth with a little bit because, things are missing and all of that. So, I'd assume, I think usually the monitoring agent takes a couple weeks as well. This lottery is in late September. I'd probably say later in November, maybe. Closing sometimes takes a month. It would be later on this year, I would think. November, December at the earliest, probably. Will there be an opportunity to have an inspection? Yes, I believe so. And that's another question that I can't believe that I've never been asked. But yeah, I believe so. I can't imagine that would be waived for any reason, especially for an affordable unit. I don't know at what point in the process that would happen other than when you are getting your mortgage commitment there, but yes. And what would the property taxes be? So the property taxes are going to be dependent on what Brookline's tax rate is. I don't have that in front of me right now, but it would be dependent just on the town. Wondering if that's something that we should look up for you guys at some point. Do you know how much the closing cost will be? Does it have to be out of pocket? I think closing costs vary, and I don't have a number for you. Would it be out of pocket? Yes, it wouldn't, unless you have some sort of agency who is subsidizing you for closing costs, or if there's some sort of grant that you've been able to apply for, yes, that wouldn't be part of the affordable housing program, in terms of it being paid for by the state or anything like that. I'm going to circle back up here. If you guys have any other questions, I'm still here just to look back at that direct message from earlier. Anyone else? I'm going to reply to this direct message while we're on here, but I want to make sure I don't miss anyone else's question either. So I'll be on here for another few minutes if you guys have any other questions. If not, have a great night and thank you so much for tuning in. This is a great opportunity and we hope that you get your application in so we can work with you on this. And any questions that come up after tonight that you maybe didn't think of right now, you can get in touch with us at info@sebhousing.com. And I should have shown you these. Okay, so I'll be on here for just a couple minutes. All right, everyone, if you have any other questions, like I said, email us at info@sdbhousing.com. Yes, I just saw, Jorge, your question, is it possible to get a recording of today's session? This will be, this is being recorded right now, so it will be posted on our YouTube channel, probably sometime in the next 15 minutes. It just has to upload and I'll get it up there. And it will be listed on our website under Crowninshield as well. I'll put the link in there. Another question here, how can I provide, hold on, just scrolling through here. How can I provide income verification? So the income verification would only be asked of you if you are one of the top households after the lottery. And so you don't need to submit any of that right now. All you need to submit is the lottery application with your mortgage pre-approval. And then following the lottery, if you are selected to move forward, at that point, you'd be asked to submit your income verification, tax, asset information after the lottery. Looking for a direct message here from someone. Julie, I'm answering your message now here too. I know some of you guys, we don't want to miss any questions. For college students, same thing. So I think the question here is income verification for college students. If you're full-time, yes, you still will need to supply their pay stubs, for example, even though we're only going to be counting $480 of their any wage they have. So their income is not, full-time student income is not going to affect your total household income very much at all, but we do still need to have it on file to show that we have verified that. All right, I think I got everybody. So thanks so much for joining in. Info@scbhousing.com if you guys have any questions from here on out. We look forward to getting your application. Have a great night.